This video is going to specifically tackle how to factorize quadratics and the two types of quadratics you're going to get. The first one is when the a value is equal to 1. Second one is when a value is not equal to 0. Now, what do I mean by the a value? The a value refers to the when we write quadratics in standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, quadratics are formulas of the where the highest power is 2. If I didn't have this part, then I would only have bx plus c, which is a linear equation. And then quadratic goes to the power of 2, cubic goes to the power of 3, and so on. So for quadratics, factorizing them is not as easy as it seems. It's tempting to factorize here only, but that's not how we do it. So it's a slightly different and unusual way of factorizing. So if I want to factorize quadratics, it's divided into two parts. The first one, as I mentioned, is when the a is equal to 1, meaning you only have this situation. So the coefficient of x squared is 1. Let's try an example. So if I have something such as x squared plus 3x plus 2. The way to factorize it is to say, well, which is what we call the sum and product method, is to think what, so you first think of the products. So what multiplies to give 2? So the product always looks at the c value. So what numbers multiply to give a positive 2? And that's going to be 1 times 2. You also have a negative 1 and a negative 2. Always look at the negative values instead. Don't forget about them. And then you're going to say, well, from these numbers that I've listed, which one add up to give the b value? Your b value in this case is 3, and it's a positive 3, so make sure that you're taking the sign at the front. So if I add 1 and 2, it's going to give me 3. If I add negative 1 and negative 2, it's going to give me a negative 3. So obviously this is what I'm looking for, which means this is my 2 pair of numbers, and the factorization is just simply going to be x plus 1, x plus 2. Now, the reason this works is because when you are expanding the bracket, okay, let's say we're expanding, this is just a check. This is going to give me an x squared, that's fine. Now, if I have, this is going to give me 2x, and this is going to give me x. So the two coefficients I picked, the two numbers, are adding up to give 3, which is what I wanted here. So this is the x and this is the 2x, and they should add up to a 3. And lastly, you have the 1 multiplied by 2, which should give me a 2, which is what we did here, which is why the two numbers have to multiply to give your c, and they have to add up to give the b, because that's what happens here. So this is 3x plus 2, which is where we are back here. Let's say we do a different example, and this time it's, let's say we have x squared minus x minus 12. So you can, in the beginning, just distinguish your values. Your a is equal to 1, a is 1, your b is negative 1, just be careful here, and your c is negative 12. So again, we're going to go through a product that will give you the c. And if you ever forget, try to expand the brackets, and you'll notice it's the two numbers that you're going to pick are always going to multiply to give negative 12. And in this case, let's go through all the ones. You might spot it immediately, but I like to go through all of them just in case with students. So this is another set, and then I could have 6 and negative 2. I could have that's an unusual order. I could have 2 and negative 6. I could have negative 2 and 6. I could have 3 and negative 4, or negative 3 and 4, and that's it. That's where the pairs stop. And then from these numbers, which one sum to give the b value, which is my negative 1? And I could go through any of them, but I could just save some time and notice that 3 and a negative 4 will give me a negative 1, which is what I need. So I'm just going to open the bracket, positive 3 and a negative 4. And I can multiply out to make sure that my answer checks out. 3 times negative 4 will give me negative 12, and then 3 plus the negative 4 will give me the negative 1, which I need here. Now, what if we don't have the a value equals to 1? And this is where it gets harder, and it's normal that it gets harder. It's just that it's a slightly more complicated method. You just need to take the time to practice, maybe watch this video a couple of times. I'm going to put some examples in the end as well. So this is when you don't have a equals to 1, and we need to do the factorization a bit differently. So if we go through an example, say 3x squared plus 7x minus 6. Now the first part is we're still going to use product and sum, but before product and sum method, we need to do an extra step, and after product and sum method, the factorization is going to be slightly different. What you're going to do first, let's just identify our a, b's, and c's. So our a in this case is 3, the b is 7, and the c is negative 6. Your first step is to multiply your a and the c. And this is going to give me 3 times negative 6, which is negative 18. Your second step will be to use product and sum. But this time, the product is going to be negative 18 instead of the c. So this is where it gets a bit confusing. So the product will be your a times c value. So which two numbers multiply to give a negative 18? And it seems like we'll have a lot of options here, but let's go through them. So we have 1 and negative 18, negative 1 and 18. We have 2 and negative 9, negative 2 and 9. Notice how I usually go in order here, just because it makes it easier to keep track of the numbers. We have what we did just there, which is 3 and negative 6, negative 3 and 6. And that's it. So how do I know that's it? Because if I start going to 4, I can't get to 18 through 4. If I get to 5, I also can't get to 18. And then if I get to 6, I'm back to this process, 6, 7, 8, 9, which is why I try to stick in this order. So these are all my numbers. Now from these numbers, I need to find a sum, and the sum will still be the same. Which ones add up to give a b? So it's only the product that's different here. The b is 7, and I could go through all of them, but I could spot the 9, and minus 2 will give me a 7. So this is the pair I'm looking at. Now, the factorization unfortunately does not go as straightforward. What you're going to do is called splitting the middle term. So this is called splitting the middle term. And that's precisely what it means. You're going to split the middle term. So we're going to write 3x squared stays the same, negative 6 stays the same. The 7x, well, we just recognize that it could come from 9 and negative 2. So let's rewrite it as such. And it doesn't matter at all which one comes first. So 7x is the same as saying 9x minus 2x, or minus 2x plus 9. Again, nothing too different. This is what you wanted to find. We just rewrote 7 as such. And what you're going to do now is after splitting the middle term, we're going to factorize in pairs. So this is the, there's no space. Basically, this is factorizing in groups or factorizing in pairs. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at this as one factorization, and then you're going to look at this as one factorization. So factorizing the first term, the first two numbers, full factorization, I'm going to take 3x out, and that's going to give me x plus 3. And then factorizing here, and just be aware, students do get confused here. They don't know what sign to put in. The sign you put here right now is going to be the sign of whatever you're going to factor out. So I would like to factor out a negative 2 out. So I'm going to put in a negative 2. If you're factoring a positive 2, then you just put a plus 2. So the sign is going to be based on what you factor out. And then it's going to be x plus 3. Your goal is to get these two brackets the same. Now I could have taken out a factor of positive 2 out, but that would have given me negative x minus 3, which is not what I wanted, which should give me, and if this happens to you, it's fine. Just look at the brackets and go, oh, okay, I could take a negative out as well. So if I take a negative out, I'm going to end up with the same brackets. And what you're going to do is you're going to bring these together, and then whatever is left goes into your other bracket. Now, there are simpler ways of thinking about these. Some people just start by writing 3x and x into brackets and then going through the process. At the moment, this is the most straightforward method I could think of, is just that you would get marks for these intermediate steps instead of guessing from the other methods. So just to quickly recap, it's a times c this time. When the a is not equal to 1, you have negative 18. You're going to do product and sum, but this time it's based on the a times c that you found. Once you've found the two values, you're going to split the middle term, and then you're going to factorize them in pairs. Once you factorize in pairs, you should get the same bracket. This bracket is going to go on its own, and then whatever is left is going to be also in the other bracket. Basically, what you're doing here, if you want to go a bit more technical on algebraic, is that you're taking x plus 3 as a factor out, and then it's as if you're multiplying this blue bracket by 3x, and this is what you're going to get. And then you're multiplying the blue bracket by negative 2, and this is what you're going to get. So it's like factorization, but with an expression this time. I'm going to go through one more example, and I would encourage you to pause the video and try this on your own as well. That would be useful. So if I have 2x squared minus 9x minus 5. So do pause it and try it on your own, and then you can look at the solution if you want to. So the first step was to look at a times c, which is, or let's write the values down. A is 2, b is negative 9, and c is negative 5. A times c would be 2 times negative 5. Oops. Negative 5, which would be a negative 10. And then we look at the product of negative 10. And this would be 1, negative 1 and 10, 1 and negative 10, 2 and negative 5, 5 and negative 2. I just contradicted myself. This is not in chronological order. It's negative 2 and 5. And that's it. So from these, I'm going to look at the sum that will give me the negative 9. And in this case, we have negative 10 and 1. That will give me the negative 9. So negative 10 and 1 is what I'm looking for. So I'm gonna split my middle term as such. So my negative 9 is now gonna be negative 10x plus x. Don't forget the x. It should have an x in there because this should simplify back to where you started. Again, it doesn't matter which one you put front. I could put the x here and negative 10 here. Your final answer should definitely be the same. And I will try and do that at the end. So then I'm going to factorize in pairs. I'm going to factorize this first two set of numbers. So I'm going to take a factor of 2x out. I'm left with x minus 5, and then I'm going to factor these out. So notice I'm taking the positive x here, minus 5, and they don't really have any factor, so it's a positive 1 that I'm taking a factor out, so positive 1. Remember this trick. If there's no factor, then your factor is just a 1, and then if you're unsure about the sign, then obviously it's a positive unless you're sure it's a negative. So I'm getting the same bracket. So I'm going to write x minus 5, which is what they share, and then whatever is left, which is these two, 2x plus 1, and that's it. You can expand the bracket to check that your answer is correct. Now, just to ease yourselves, I'm going to switch these two and show you that you will get the same answer if you swap them. So factor, I'm going to take a factor of x out here. So I'm going to get 2x plus 1. And in here, I'm going to take a factor of negative 5 out. So I'm going to get 2x plus 1. And check your factorization, just make sure that's correct. I am getting the same bracket, so I'm going to get 2x plus 1. And then whatever is left over, which is x minus 5. And notice how we got the same factorization here. You can expand out if you want to, just to double check. Hopefully this video was clear and easy to follow through.